Good morning, everyone. It is lovely to see you, and thank you, everyone, for your part you've played in today's service. Appreciated it, and I think, like Jason, we should just go home now. But there is something to say, so we will say a few more words. This will be my final Sabbath here for this year. I will be at Glenorchy Church for the Pathfinder investiture for next week. So this is not my final Sabbath ever, just in case you were tempted to think that. But the final Sabbath for this year, I will be on annual leave from the 23rd of December through to the 24th of January. And so I will miss you. And I'll try to remember you while I'm on holidays. So because this is my last Sabbath here, I just wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and Happy Holidays and Season's greetings and all of that. I hope that you have a great time over the break. Just to mention tonight too, at Glenorchy Church, we have our Community Christmas Carols program, which I'm emceeing tonight. So that's at 7 p.m. If you want to come along, bring somebody with you. That's at 7 p.m. at Glenorchy tonight. What am I going to say next? Let's turn to the Bible. Let's turn to the last chapter of the last book of the Old Testament. It's Malachi. We're going to turn to Malachi. My sermon title for today is called Turning Hearts. And we're going to look at Malachi chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. And there we read this. Malachi chapter 4 and verse 5 and 6. It says, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse." These are the last two verses of the Old Testament, and the NASB, that last part there where it says, "Lest I come and strike the earth with a curse." So NASB says, "So that I will not come and smite the earth, the land, with a curse." In other words, God's desire is that the hearts of the fathers are turned to the children, and the hearts of the children are turned to their fathers. Now, we could say a lot about the Elijah message, the coming of Elijah, and we did that in a three-part series that we did very recently at the end of our Is God For Real program. We talked about the prophetic implications of the Elijah message. You know, the word Elijah, the name Elijah means "my God is Jehovah." So there's a message in the name of that man. And we talk about the prophetic implications of what that message is. And we did that a few weeks ago. But I want to focus in a little bit on this last part of verse 6, where it talks about he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, the hearts of the children to their fathers. And sometimes we don't talk so much about that part of the Elijah message. The idea that God would have a message and a movement at the end of time, and that part of that message and that movement would be to change people's relationships, particularly within the family. That there would be a turning of hearts. The implication being, if you've got to turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers, the implication is that those hearts are turned away. That they're not perhaps where they ought to be. And we want to talk about family relationships today, because we're coming to the holiday season. And anybody leaving the state? Anybody brave enough? Just me? A few of us, a couple of us. We're planning to leave today. Hopefully they let us back in eventually. But we're going to visit Marie's parents, and that will be great. Hopefully see our son as he comes down from New South Wales and so forth. And of course, you know, this time of year we often will get together with family, but maybe there are some family you won't be getting together with. Maybe there's some family you can't get together with because they might be just too far away. Or maybe they're no longer here. And what is our relationship with them, or what has it been? When it talks about turning hearts, we think about that word turning. In the New Testament, the word turning and the word conversion is often the same Greek word. It's the same word, the idea that we need some kind of conversion. And we can read this if you pick it up in Acts chapter 9 verse 35, we read that. Acts 9 verse 35, it says, "So all who dwelt at Lydda and Sharon saw him and turned to the Lord." So this is talking about people converting. They're turning to the Lord because of something that the disciples were doing. If you look at Acts 11:21. It says, "And the hand of the Lord was with them, and a great number believed and turned to the Lord." They were converted. They turned their hearts over to the Lord, and we can see that a number of different times. Jesus himself talked to Peter in the Gospel of Luke 22:32. Maybe you remember where Jesus is actually predicting that Peter's going to deny his Lord. And maybe we'll read that because Peter's so sure of himself. He's so confident. Where are we looking? Luke 22. We'll pick this up. I'm going to pick it up in verse 31. It says, "And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, indeed Satan has asked for you that he may sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren." But Peter said to him, "Lord, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death." And Jesus reminds him, "Actually, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows." Jesus knew him better than he knew himself. God knows our hearts better than we know our hearts. And God knows that such hearts need to be turned. They need to be converted. Something else that's not very pretty about hearts in the Bible is in Jeremiah 17:9 and 10. Jeremiah 17:9 and 10. This is sometimes hard for us to read, but in Jeremiah 17:9 and 10 it says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doings. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked." It's talking about the human heart. And this is why I think the Bible talks about the need for turning hearts, for changed hearts, for converted hearts, and the way in which we relate to others. The Bible talks about giving us a new heart in Ezekiel. We're going to relate this in a moment to family relationships. But in Ezekiel 36, 26 to 27. God is speaking through Ezekiel. He says, "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them." I appreciated, Jess, your illustration with the sponges. That was very pertinent to today's message. And so we need a softening of the heart. Now, when it comes to family relationships, reaching family members with the gospel can be difficult. I maybe like you, I mentioned this a little bit in our mission briefing video this week. And by the way, that'll be the last mission briefing video for this year. We'll pick that up again next year. But in the mission briefing video, I was talking about the fact that perhaps like you, I have family members who are not in church this morning. In fact, as far as Seventh-day Adventism concerns, I'm the only Adventist on my side of the family. Only one. And how do I relate to others in my family? How do they relate to me? How does that affect how I relate to them? Reaching family with the gospel can sometimes be the hardest thing to do. Why is that, by the way? You can talk to me. Why is it? Why do you think that it is that it's hardest to reach family? They know us well and they know all our flaws. That's right. We don't want to alienate them. But this is the gospel. This is the good news. How could it possibly? Isn't that interesting? Isn't that, how the gospel could make somebody angry? Because I used to be an atheist and I became a believer, I sort of have a different, perhaps, perspective than some in terms of the fact that you kind of have a concept of who God is. You may not believe, but you have an idea about the God that other people believe in. And you think to yourself, why would you ever waste time with that? And then, of course, you have a bit of a paradigm shift and you realise that the God that you imagined isn't the God of the Bible. That the God of the Bible is a different person to the one that you imagined. In fact, one of the reasons our church exists, of course, is because the world has a picture of God that isn't a biblical picture of God. It's one of the reasons our church exists. But it seems harder to reach family sometimes with the message because, like you say, they know you so well and it's like, well, are you going to teach us? And of course, sometimes our own attitudes as believers are not always helpful, right? Sometimes we can share the message in a way that is not the way that Jesus would have necessarily shared it. Sometimes we can be gentler on the stranger than we can on the person that we know the most. So it's interesting. There was a song a few years ago, back in 1988, there was a song called The Living Years by Mike and the Mechanics. Does anybody know that song? You know that song? I think it's a great song. I could have joined that band because I used to be a mechanic. But anyway, but it was an interesting song. It opens with this line. It says, "Every generation blames the one before, and all of their frustrations come beating on your door." There's a lot of interesting lines in the song. And at the last, he's basically talking about the relationship between, I guess, the singer or the individual in the song and their father. And what I like about this song, I'll read this last little portion. It says, "I wasn't there that morning when my father passed away. I didn't get to tell him all the things I had to say. I think I caught his spirit later that same year. I'm sure I heard his echo in my baby's newborn tears. I just wish I could have told him in the living years." And my father passed away. I was looking at, last night I was speaking to my mother and I'm going to start welling up in a minute. I was talking to my mother and brother on Skype, as we always seem to do. Each week, it's usually Thursday night or Friday night, depending on where my brother's work responsibilities lie. And we get on there, and thankfully our son, who's in New South Wales, he jumps on too, so we have a little bit of a family gathering each Thursday or Friday evening. And we were on there last night talking to my mother and brother, and afterwards we got talking a little bit about Dad, as sometimes we often do, and Dad passed away 14, nearly 15 years ago now. And so when my dad passed away, I collected a whole bunch of photographs together, and my son, who would have been about, let's think about this, he would have been 10. He put together this PowerPoint thing to music with all the pictures of my dad. So my son got to put all that together, which was great. And I sometimes, watch that from time to time and just remember Dad. And but this song sort of strikes home for me in the sense that there's so many things I'd like to talk to Dad about now that I didn't talk to him about then. Sometimes you don't really know your family members that well. With this in mind, a few years ago, when my mum and my brother came over to visit us, I sat down Mum and put the video camera in front of her, and I just did an interview with her and asked her a few things and say, tell me what your first 5 years was like. What can you remember? What are your earliest memories of life? And then, what was school life like? What was life growing up? My mum grew up through the war. My grandfather was away at the war for 6 years. And what was that like? And what were your grandparents like? Because I don't remember who they were. And just trying to find out all these little details. And I'm so glad that we got to do that. And of course, we still can talk to Mum. She's still alive now. But I wish I'd have done that with my dad. And I guess my point is that maybe you have family members at the end of this year. It's only the 11th of December. You've still got time to maybe connect with not only parents or grandparents or siblings or cousins or whoever it may be, maybe people who you don't see eye to eye with. And it may be that we have to do some eating of humble pie. Because as Christians, and maybe particularly as Seventh-day Adventists, it's very easy to take a superior stance, right? Because it's there. It's right there. Look, I'll show you which verse it is. And it's sometimes worth remembering that we believe in and we follow the truth. Doesn't mean I am the truth, right? Jesus is the truth, and we follow him. We're not asking people to follow us, although sometimes our children will. But sometimes we can take a superior attitude towards family members because, at least I didn't make that mistake. And maybe we need to fix some fences with family members that maybe we've not given them a great picture of Christ. Maybe we need to apologise for some of the things we've done or said, or maybe the way we've treated people. And, that may involve taking the first step. You may think about, they did things to me. But I like the fact that in the gospel, God took the first step in approaching us, even though he'd done nothing wrong. That Jesus chose to come into this world. Even in the Garden of Eden, you remember Adam and Eve were aware that they had chosen poorly, and they were afraid of God and they were hiding from God, but God comes looking for them. Adam, where are you? I like the fact that God is willing to make the first move, even when he's not in the wrong. And I'd like to hope and to think that God will touch our hearts and soften our hearts in order that we might make that approach with those family members. Maybe it's not your father or your mother, maybe it's somebody else in the family. That maybe you're not planning to see them this holiday season. Maybe you haven't seen them for a while. But there's an opportunity to reach out to those of our own family. You know, I think, do you ever do this? Do you ever examine your own life to the point where I wonder if I stepped outside my life and I examined who I was from the outside, would I like that person? Would I have any advice for that person? You know, we're so in here that we sometimes, you've seen some of those reality TV shows maybe, right, where some of them, it's a bit of a joke really because they construct a whole bunch of things, right? So it's not really reality TV. But where, you're watching somebody else's life and you're probably thinking, well, if it was me, I wouldn't have done that, or I would have said this, or whatever it is. And they even have shows now of people watching reality TV and commenting on it, right? Gogglebox or whatever it's called. You ever seen that? I don't think I've ever seen an episode, but I've seen the shorts, But are we ever tempted to do that for our own life? To think about, how have I treated others? How have I shaped their attitudes towards me? Or how have I shaped their attitudes towards God? And to think about those who may not share the same beliefs as us, may not practice life the same way as us. How can we reach out to them? Proverbs 15:1 says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." And it's easy for, us sometimes, I think, to think of things or hurts or situations in the past that are going to affect the next thing that I say to that person. And to be able to allow God, through the Spirit, to soften our hearts, to give us a new heart, to turn hearts of fathers to the children and hearts of children to their fathers, which is also part of God's end time message. Now, I like all the prophecy stuff. I became a Christian because all the prophetic messages, and I saw that the omniscient foreknowledge of God. And but we can't forget that there's an emotional aspect to that there's a way in which God wants to change me as a person in that message. And so we need to maybe humble ourselves in regard to the way we connect with family members particularly. Jesus said in Matthew 5:5, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Humbling ourselves. I was at an outreach campaign. It's not just fathers and sons, it's any family members, I guess. But I was in an outreach campaign in another town, not here. And a lady had been coming to the outreach campaign. She came to me one night and she said to me, "How do I reach my husband with this message?" And I said to her, "Speak less, love more." And, I'm not one of these people, you've heard, maybe you've heard it said that preach the gospel to every person, if necessary, use words, right? You've heard that. Well, it obviously is necessary to use words because the Bible uses a lot of them. Jesus used a lot of them. So I'm not one who says don't use any words, okay? However, when it comes to family, I do think that actions speak louder than words. And, I said to this lady, I said, what you're learning about God, does it change you into a better person? Or do you just have a lot more knowledge? And I love knowledge. I'm glad that the Bible is as long as it is. There's a lot in here. But does it change us? Or is it just head knowledge? Is it heart knowledge? And I said, my advice to you would be, because I could tell that she had been sharing what she'd been learning about the Bible. And I was thinking, maybe your best approach would be just to be the most loving person that you could be, the most loving wife to your husband that you could be. And allow that to be the evidence of what you've been learning. And it's interesting because I heard from this person since, and she said, it's working. Somebody once said we should love them till they ask why. Love them till they ask why. And I think this is particularly, you could apply this to everybody, but I just think it's particularly pertinent to family members because it is more difficult to perhaps share the gospel with those within your family who may not be on the same page as you. And we need to be sure that we are sharing the love of God, that we are being loving to them, whilst not compromising who we are, but actually more demonstrating who Christ is in that way. I want to share a little passage from James and then we'll come to a close. James 1. It's not specifically talking to this particular scenario, but I think it's helpful. James chapter 1. And we're going to read from 19 through 27. James chapter 1, 19 through 27. He says, "So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath," slow to anger or passion. "For the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Therefore lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves." And this is what I think in terms of not just having head knowledge, but letting it change who we are. "But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does. If anyone among you thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless. Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world." You know, when you think about it, when Jesus was here, who did Jesus have the most problems with? It was the religious folks, right? It was the religious folks. Those who were actually meant to represent God, but who were so misrepresenting God that Jesus had to call them to account. And I just think that there's a message for us in that part at the end of Malachi that says, turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers. That at this particular time, when the world is being reminded that Jesus came to planet Earth to become one of us, in order to show us how to live and to die for us, that we would be reminded also of the conversion that we all need in our hearts, that we may reach out to those family members that we may not have reached out to recently. And not to tell them something, at least not to tell them some fact, but rather to tell them how much we care about them, to tell them how much we value them. I know it's not easy. We may have to be patient. But when I think of how patient God has been with me, it helps me to be more patient with them. May we choose this holiday season to connect with those in our families that we may not have the best relationship with, but we want to tell them that we care about them, and we want to help to break the ice, to soften the hearts. And maybe we need to begin by softening our own hearts. May God bless us.